Hi, and welcome to PowerViews. I'm Dan McDade, your host and president of PointClear. On PowerViews, I have the pleasure and the privilege to talk to interesting and knowledgeable experts who offer solutions to some of today's toughest marketing and sales challenges. My guest today is Tony Zambito. In 2002, Tony established the first buyer persona research methodology designed specifically for B2B marketing and sales. This innovation helps leading companies gain deeper understanding of their buyers, leading to improved lead generation and revenue performance. He's assisted companies including HP, FedEx, Robert Half International, Microsoft, and IBM, to name a few, with buyer research and utilization of buyer personas to drive increased buyer satisfaction and revenue. Tony, welcome to PowerViews.
Thank you very much, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, it's good to be with you, too. I'm a reader of yours, and I enjoy your stuff, and I appreciate you taking time to talk today. I guess the first thing is just, opening up with more of a general question. What do you see as some of the primary marketing and sales challenges in 2013, at least so far?
Well, I think the challenges are actually two in particular. One is one that's been very consistent and constant over the last 10 years. And that one in particular needs to be said about understanding buyers today. And I think as we continue to evolve in social technologies and the sort of what's called the empowerment of buyers, that means there's less and less understanding on the part of marketing and sales organizations about buyers today because they're just not as accessible as they used to be. So I think that that continues to be a major challenge. So how do you gain an understanding about buyers today, customers, even consumers, in a way that helps inform what are the appropriate, adequate strategies that you want to employ, and then how do you even begin to execute on those strategies based on how you would connect to buyers. I think the second thing that's been going on over the last 2 or 3 years is what I call, and has been called by many people, is the consumerization of business. Meaning, if you look at just the practical aspect of how many businesses now allow bring your own device into an organization. So we're starting to see this consumerization, meaning a couple things. One is there's instant accessibility. So if you cannot provide instant accessibility to many buyers or customers today, it's going to be very problematic for marketing and sales. The second thing is that the instant accessibility also has decentralized decision making, and so now it is the concept of a target buyer starts to get reshaped, reformed, and what are the influences and what is going on and who actually does have the empowerment to make a quick decision. And I see, again, to repeat, the two biggest things going on for marketing and sales today is what is this understanding of buyers, and number two is what do they do about the consumerization of business and then redesign themselves in order to connect today.
You know, it's a good segue into the second question I was going to ask you, but before I do, one of the things I think is a challenge for marketers today, salespeople and marketers, is that, the market is kind of lumped together kind of as a homogeneous grouping. And, unfortunately, at least I think that maybe it's been oversimplified. For example, if you're talking about a commodity acquisition or something that's where information is readily available and, there's not a lot of differentiation, then I think that, all of the pundits are right that, the customers take that sale a lot further along, or the buying process a lot further along than they used to. But if you talk about a more strategic sale, which is, probably defined as a more expensive solution, more strategic solution, probably more decision makers involved, then, if you're leaving it to chance for the buyers to always find you, the chances are you're out in the dark on probably some pretty strategic deals. And do you find that's something that you talk to your clients about? How do you address that issue?
Well, I think you hit it on the nail. That if there is a total reliance strictly on having buyers find you, I think what you miss is the bigger picture of the so-called network, as I call it. Buyers today are much more networked than they've ever been before. So that means by the time they actually might get to you and they might find you, there is so much going on that I talk to my clients about. For example, a network buyer might have talked to suppliers, might have talked to peers, might have talked to internal department, might have really rearranged the deck, if you will, on how they want to go about solving a particular solution. So when they find you, you may not know that story. And so for marketing and sales, not knowing that story means pretty much walking into a situation with tunnel vision and really not understanding exactly what's going on in the buyer's mind. So one of the things in a complex sale, if you will, and more strategic end sales is to really understand what that bigger picture is, how buyers are networked today versus in the past. And versus in the past, what I mean is even relatively soon. We used to have this concept of, oh, there was an approver, there was an influencer, there was a decision maker. I think even those labels are starting to get a little bit dated because buyers are so much more networked today through social technology, through collaboration software, you name it. And so they're doing a lot of things with many different people versus whether they be suppliers, internal department, even vendors who might have a say on who they want to work with if they're considering a solution that involves integrated solutions. So the world is changing in that area. So my advice to clients then is to say you really need to develop that story. You need to understand the whole story, the backstory of all the things that are going on leading up to the time they do find you.
Yeah, that's good advice, and I know that our friends at CSO Insights have tracked over the years, what does influence a buyer, and that the so-called vendors or suppliers have actually moved up in importance over the last several years as opposed to moving down in importance, which I think is really interesting.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you about, one of the things that I find anyway when talking about alignment of marketing and sales, which I think I found a 1993 article was the oldest article I found about this subject. But, one of the things I find is something as simple as what Brian Carroll calls a universal lead definition, or what is the definition of a lead? Because so often you find that, marketing is slinging stuff over because they've got quotas to hit and limited budgets, and sales basically is ignoring them. And as a result, there's an awful lot of waste and not a lot of traction. Do you feel like the definition of a lead is an important part of this process? And if so, great. And what else would you add? And if not, why? And what else would you do differently?
Okay, I think the definition of a lead is quite important. When you look at the fact that many organizations are set up, perhaps even rightly or wrongly, could be questioned there, but they are set up to measure opportunities and to measure what actually constitutes a lead. So the first step is to have marketing and sales agree on the definition of a lead, or agree on what criteria are met in order to say this is a qualified lead. And a qualified lead to me is they are ready to engage in a conversation with a sales representative, for example. They are ready to really kind of dig into heels and do the consideration and do the analysis. Having said that, I think where organizations need to go as of today, especially in 2013 and looking ahead to 2014, is the recognition that the behavior of buyers, people in general, I think are going to be much more important to understand. And what I tend to think, and based on my qualitative interviews with buyers and qualitative research, is that a person that's engaged pre-qualified lead has a different set of behaviors going on versus when they're actually in the buying cycle. So understanding what those types of behaviors are and how to adapt to them is really, really important. And I think it can make a difference right at this point of conversion where they go from a lead to a potential buyer. Mm-hmm. So understanding those behaviors are very, very important, which means then that what do marketing and sales need to do? I strongly believe that one of the things that's missing in lead generation is that we haven't, as a field, if you will, marketing and sales, is we haven't spent enough time in lead research. So we're with the advent, obviously, years ago of buyer personas, trying to understand the buyer, we've kind of dug into the buy-in cycle. What we really haven't done enough of is really understanding what is going on behavior-wise pre-buy. What does a lead behavior look like? What does an audience behavior look like? What are those things that will tell us more about how we can best position, how we can best serve? And so my belief, in my world of personas, I actually believe that we're going to start to see the evolving of a lead persona, which is going to be very different than a buyer persona when you look at sales and marketing, because there's just so much going on pre-buy cycle. How do you address an audience? How do you engage people? How do you nurture them? And I think what we still tend to do out of conventional habit is we tend to try to dive into that buying cycle right away and really try to get into that meat of it, and maybe not pay enough attention to exactly the nurturing, the lead, understanding those kind of behaviors.
Yeah, I liken it to I have an overly simplistic sales cycle, but my overly simplistic sales cycle is that you find a pain or need, get agreement that there's pain or need, get agreement to do something about the pain or need, agree to a generic solution, and then finally agree to a customized specific solution. And that marketing starts and stops at step 1, and sales wants to start and stop at step 5. So
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's a few steps, 2, 3, and 4 to kind of get at this issue. So it's not like we haven't had the technology to address this issue. I think we've just kind of, in fact, I go back to one of my biggest fears is that, we used to be one-to-many marketers, and then we theoretically became one-to-one marketers, but with all this technology out there, we've actually started to slip back towards one-to-many marketers, with email marketing, seeming to drive things. And I don't know about you. I'd like your opinion on that. I think that's, it can be a horrible mistake.
Yeah, I think it is. It can be a terrible thing. And the reason why I strongly believe that the research up front needs to be much more greater is that, not everyone is a buyer at that particular point. And so organizations find themselves treating everyone like a buyer. And when you have a wonderful opportunity to sort of nurture relationships over time, you may actually be hurting yourself, where if you don't understand that maybe somebody is not a buyer, they're up and coming in their career, and they're really looking for knowledge to advance their career, as an example. They may just walk away from you because they're not in a buying mode. They're not ready to buy anything, but you might have missed an opportunity to nurture a relationship over time. So I still believe that that means one-to-one versus one-to-many, because you're looking to develop as many one-to-one relationships as you can, whether they be nurturing, whether they be education, whether they be actually solving a solution, a buying cycle. And I think there's so many opportunities there that cannot be missed. And I think when there's only a one-dimensional thinking of one-to-many, and there's only thinking about getting someone to buy, you're missing several opportunities to have a one-to-one relationship that can actually build loyalty over a long time.
Yeah, I think that's new thinking that is important. If you ever want to write a blog about that and give it to me, I'll be happy to publish it and promote it for you.
Perfect.
I came back from a few days vacation yesterday, and all of a sudden I'm making meetings for June. I'm thinking, what the heck happened to 2013? It's almost half over now. But if we're in the chairs of marketers and salespeople and looking at, we're I guess just a little more than a quarter way through the year. What advice do you have for them? What should they be looking at? What should they be doing differently than they've done before, for the rest of this year at least?
I think the fact that you came back from vacation, you probably saw a little bit of an uptick. And what probably happened there is you've got the first quarter result and a lot of misses.
Mm-hmm.
So what does marketing and sales do short term versus long term? Now we're getting into second quarter is halfway over. I already missed the first quarter. So first advice would be do not panic. You see a lot of organizations begin to panic, and do things that would be uncharacteristic and maybe hurt their branding. So, an example of that would be, all right, you get your salespeople on a blitz, and they are saying the wrong things, they are doing the wrong things, it's pretty haphazard, and, I always say don't put noise in front of a customer, and that's a lot of noise. So first advice is just not to panic, and second advice is not to put a lot of noise in front of your customer. What I would do is I would go back and begin to examine a couple things. One is, all right, is your current understanding about your buyers on target? And by going back and looking at what's been missing, you may be able to sort of gauge that level of where you currently understand where the market is, where your solutions actually fit in. Is it really a sales problem? Is it really a branding problem? You really need to take some hard steps to do that. And then your execution. Look at your execution of your strategy and see if there's just really some faulty lines that happen in your execution. Maybe the strategy is sound, but the execution of the strategy has some real major holes in it. So I would begin sort of an examination, and the thing about business today and the tools that we're afforded is that we can make almost real-time changes. So make smart real-time changes. Do not feel like you have to stick to a specific strategy. Use the buyer as your cue as to where to go.
One thing I'll just tag on, and I totally agree with what you just said, and that is in the process area. One place where companies are leaving a lot of money on the table is not effectively following up on the opportunities that have been generated, whether they came from marketing or just inbound related to years of branding, as you would say. So we find on average that about 95% of leads are basically wasted. And if you go back through what you've already created, it's not too late. It will be too late at the end of 2013, to go back after Q1 leads. But, Q1 leads right now are actually probably still in the sales cycle, at least for more complex sales. So that's one area of efficiency that I would look at.
Right. And I'll just add to that. What happens usually is if there's a miss, like in a first quarter, for example, how people begin to view leads can really hurt them. They begin to say, okay, this customer potential prospect is, probably 2014. So suddenly they go into some file, some folder that it's going to be ignored until October, November, later in the year. This is, in my opinion, a major mistake, because what it does is it doesn't allow you, or we'll go back to our one-to-one relationship, to continue to build that relationship so that when 2014 begins to get in the picture around October, November, this person is thinking about you. You're not starting at the zero starting point to try to re-engage, re-educate the customer. So I think with the panic mode to me is all these potential customers that they talk to in the first quarter that are ticked off to like, wow, 2014, I don't have time for them, is a major mistake. And I think long term that hurts the company over a 2-3 year period.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. What have we missed? What's on your mind that we haven't talked about so far today?
I think one of the things that is on my mind, if I look at 2013 and looking ahead into 2014, where do I see a capability that's going to be quite important over the next couple years? And to me, we are starting to look at what is predictability. And I think this is going to be a big, important capability for an organization to acquire over the next couple of years. The ability to predict buyer behavior, to predict modeling who their buyers are going to be, is going to be very advantageous for those that can get that kind of capability. Because what they're going to be able to do is have that ability to anticipate not only solutions, but sales approaches, content marketing, messaging, and how to connect with buyers on a level that their competitors just can't. So again, it's the ability to not only research, understand your customers, gain some valuable insights, But I think the ability to anticipate, to predict, to have some foresight into where buyers are going to be is going to be, I think, one of the biggest difference makers going into 2013 and 2014 is those companies that can acquire that capability.
I think to your point, we get a lot of companies that come to us and say, we'll ask them, to define their current buyer, and they'll define it, but they'll say, but we want to sell to instead.
Right.
We've been selling to $50 million companies, we want to sell to $500 million companies, and they want to accomplish that next quarter, which obviously is going to be very tough because you're selling to who you're selling to for a reason, and you have to have a strategic approach to how do you sell into a different market. And I think that, I haven't heard that from other people, so I think that's another kind of a big idea for today.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think so too.
Tony, I know you have a new website. I actually tried to check it out yesterday, and I think it's still under construction. But can you tell our audience how can they get a hold of you, and maybe a little bit about the kind of projects that you look for and where you think you can be the most help?
Okay. First of all, on Twitter, I can be found at Tony Zambito. You'll be able to find me on LinkedIn under Tony Zambito, all combined again. And my new website, which hopefully will be up by the very soon, is TonyZambito.com. And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help organizations in really understanding their particular buyers. Obviously, I go back to my founding of the buyer persona methodology and the approach, and I'm kind of quite happy in where that has gone over the last 2 years. Of course, there's some that have there's some ways it has gone in a different path than I really would recommend companies to do, but that, I still think it has quite powerful ideas there. And what I'm trying to do is help organizations, like I've helped before, to gain a better understanding of who their customers are and gain this predictability insight, if you will, about how they can inform their strategies into the future and make the right plans. That's basically what I do, and typically I think a real strength is to be able to actually provide that third-party qualitative research with buyers directly. That's very hard for organizations to do themselves because it's just very natural for buyers to throw up a wall between an organization and themselves in being very candid about what's on their mind.
So I can see it now. You've spurned another new industry with the predictability management solutions.
There we go. Yes. I think I'm working on a concept that you'll be able to find on my website when it's launched, which is I call it buyer foresight. It's going to be a very important capability to be able to predict buyer behavior, predict buyers' methods and processes and those kind of things as they continue to change. And that's why predictability is going to be very important, because there's without question, we're going to have new introductions of technologies that are going to constantly change behaviors, and so we're going to have to know what kind of potential scenarios that we can predict and on how buyers will not only behave but why they buy, and those important kind of questions that we'll need to get answered.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tony, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time. I think you've given the audience some great insights, and we'll look forward to getting this published and promoted. But thank you again. And for now, this is Dan McDade signing off from another edition of PowerViews. Thank you for watching.